cracking on with the brand new tier list that we are putting together. Today, we're going to be tackling the 2 threats. So let's take a look at those. Hey guys, Rich from Richmond Gaming. Hope everyone is doing fantastically well. And yes, again, it's the most requested episodes that we've ever had. So we're carrying on with them. We're taking a look at 2 threat characters, and we're going to be ranking each of them from S to D. And joining me once again on this journey of discovery is Mr. Quinn Duggan. Quinn, how the hell are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right. I'm not sure I want to go on a journey of discovery with you, Rich.
Why not? What's wrong with
I
a
don't
journey
know.
of
This
discovery?
feels a bit, white van with candy written on the side of
I don't know what you mean.
it.
So, Quinn, before we jump into 2 threats, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because obviously we speak a lot about how a good 4 threat needs to be self-sufficient and do X and do Y and do Z, and obviously there's a little bit less expectation on a 3 threat. But for you, what makes up a good 2 threat? What are you looking for when? Because you typically want to have at least you want one in your roster as for the most part, don't you? What is it you're looking for when you're picking a 2 threat?
So I think the main thing with 2 threats is threat versatility, right? In terms of just allowing you to hit certain threat values and not feel like, you're missing out on something by having bigger characters that might not fit quite in there properly.
Yeah,
And I think the thing with the 2 is whilst they're enabling you to bring these bigger characters, because that's typically how I use them, and I think it's how you use them too. I know there are wider factions that use them to just flood the board. But I think the main thing with the 2 threat is that they just sort of do the background work in my
yeah,
eyes, right? They're nothing extraordinary. They can have some really, really impactful moments, and there are definitely some 2 threats out there that do more than you'd expect of your average 2. But for me, it's just being that character that sits on that objective or basically keeps parity with points whilst your other characters do what they need to do to engineer that situation where you win the game, right?
yeah. I think for me, it's weird, isn't it? Because I'd say racking up those VPs is a great thing for them to do, but then also there's a couple on this list who are really good on the offensive side of things as
Mm.
well. One of them who, in particular, being able to do a guaranteed damage against every character, but I think maybe 3 in the game, twice per round is pretty darn good. So yeah, they offer some. They often, what you often find is there isn't a sort of a baseline for 2 threats, isn't there? And if they go above that in any way, shape, or form, they lose something at the other side of it. So in the likes of Nebula, for example, very good on the offensive side. As good as maybe even a 3 threat, but she loses that ability to be able to score you any points. So
I mean, you say
quite often
maybe as
there's
good as the
trade
three
off.
threat, maybe as good as the 6 threat.
Well, yeah, I mean her spender is as good as Magneto's builder, if they're
I mean,
contesting
it
it,
is
but
pretty good going for a character that is a third of the cost.
it is, yeah. No, obviously a lot more nuanced in what you can do, but yeah. So my point being is that there's often trade offs, isn't there? So they're never, whereas we expect 3 and 4 threat characters to be more rounded and complete, quite often if they excel in one thing, they're going to be less in the other things, aren't they? So let's start off then, Quinn. Let's jump over to our tier list. And we only have 9 to go through. There have been a couple of new additions. But let's start off with the OG 2 threat. So Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff herself. And actually, before we do that, Quinn, let's just quickly run through each of those tiers and what they mean to us. So S tier, guys, is basically going to be, they are just great, not only in affiliation, but also outside of affiliation as well. So you're going to see them splashed a lot. Now, it's a little bit more difficult with 2 threats because they are just inherently more splashable because they cost less threat, but that's the one what we're going for. A tier is going to be, they make their affiliated, their affiliated rosters most of the time. That they're an absolute constant in those affiliations. B is definitely a viable option. C is, yeah, they're okay. They've got some niche uses, niche applications. And D is, probably don't bother apart from maybe some real obscure sides of where they fit, but for the most part are not particularly good in a competitive game. So with that down then, Quinn, starting off with Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff. So she was the OG two threat that we had in the game. She came in the core box. For me, Quinn, the highlights with her are that long move and that stealth. The fact that she can go pick up an objective and then move back to a back point and happily sit there the entire game, ticking over 1 or 2 VPs. And it's a big commitment for your opponent to go up and try and take her off the board. But what are your thoughts?
I think there's one sort of skill in Natasha's wheelhouse that you've missed out there that's a very big one, and that'd be mixed technique. Because if you can get that 1 point of damage through with that attack, a stagger from a 2 threat is rough, man.
It is, but it's only 4 dice, isn't it? So, but yeah, if somebody does come up and get close to her, she does have that ability to punch back a little bit, doesn't she?
Yeah, if it's one of those sort of beta characters that, leans very heavily into that offense aspect, a long move is like, a real distance on a 3x3 table. If she just suddenly walks up behind them and like karate chops them, and suddenly they're an action down, that action is potentially worth more than Natasha's actual threat value in some games and situations.
Well, I spoke about how important Stagger was against, the new big bad in Malekith, and you're absolutely right.
I thought you were going to say Ursa Major, though.
No, but being able to, almost, a sacrificial lamb going up and, doing that stagger on him, or a big character is really good, isn't it? So
into a Malekith, she is definitely a sacrificial lamb with that 2 energy defense.
Yes, yeah, she definitely is. So for me, Quinn, she is nowhere near up in the S tier. For me, I would put her in that sort of solid B. If we had a B plus, I would probably put her in there because I think for the most part she makes it in an Avengers roster. But I don't know if she's an auto include. I don't know. You play a lot more Avengers than me. What's your thoughts?
She definitely goes in the roster. Because of the way I play Avengers, it's very weighted towards the top end of the threat spectrum, which means that oddly enough, she doesn't come out very often, which I know is counterintuitive to what we said about twos earlier, but it's one of those just weird situations where twos are basically gap fillers, right?
They are, yeah. They're you've got some usually when you've got big hitters, tall characters, and you just need to round the numbers up, sort of thing, don't you?
Yeah.
So for me, as I say, B plus. Where would you put her?
I'm thinking B plus, A minus kind of tier. So yeah, we'll go with the B.
Yeah, cool. Okay, Quinn. On to an interesting piece next, which is Bob, Agent of Hydra. And he's got some strange, unique qualities. Let's call them qualities, Quinn, that he brings to the game. But what's your...
You really broke out the thesaurus for that one.
What's your thoughts on Bob, Agent of Hydra?
I don't like him, Rich. I don't like him at all. He's like the antithesis to the way I typically play games, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, you may be able to get, one good round from him with that excessive violence that he's got. But it's very, very difficult, really, to take him ahead of anybody else. I mean, right now he's only affiliated, I believe, Quinn, to Cabal. There's a good chance, I think, that he's going to be affiliated to Hydra.
Whoa! You think an agent of Hydra is going to be Hydra affiliated? You're mad.
I know. So maybe as a filler for them, just so they've got an affiliated 2 threat, because that does increase somebody's stock, but it's just difficult to see, isn't it? Like.
Yeah, I mean, like you get that one big rocket off, but just remind me, Rich, how many dice is that rocket?
9.
9.
Yeah.
I do seem to recall a tangent I went on in a fairly recent video where I, discussed the virtues of the fact that a 9 dice attack is the
Is
worst
the
number
worst
of
attack in the
attack dice in the
game.
game.
Yeah,
I stand
it's
by that fact, especially so with Bob, because I have never seen that rocket do anything good apart from the 2 splash damage it does.
that's the nice thing. So everyone within two, but can you justify taking up a slot in your roster and in your squad for the potential hope that you may get it off? I don't think you can, Quinn. I think he's very niche. For me, he goes into D tier. I don't know about you.
Yeah, he is very much a solid D tier character. Sort of in the same vein as the leader you're most likely to see him run with, which is Sin.
Yes, yeah, very much so, very much so. Cool. Moving on then to one of the newer two threats, Quinn, but obviously not the newest of characters on this list, and it is your boy Benjamin Poindexter, aka Bullseye. And you talk about somebody at the top end of two threats. This guy for me is just absolutely solid. He's one of probably two threats that if I'm not playing Guardians, I am there in the contention for my two threat filler. And why is he so good? Well, Quinn, for me, it's the fact that even if he misses, he never misses, and just being
Whoa, whoa,
guaranteed.
whoa. You're saying that if he misses, he doesn't miss,
Yeah,
but that requires him to miss in the first place, so he does miss.
he does sometimes miss, but then he doesn't miss. I don't know how it works, but the most important thing, Quinn, is that guaranteed one damage is just really, really good. And the fact that he builds, it's guaranteed to be able to do because he gains the power from his throwing knife before he has to spend it for the I never miss,
Yeah, like
which is
there's a
really
lot
good.
of interesting interactions with Bullseye. I mean, first of all, his actual throwing knives are a pretty decent attack. Range 4, ignoring cover.
Yeah,
Sure, it's 4 dice. I mean, you have the
bleed on a
ability to
wild.
guarantee the damage. Bleed on the Wild is actually pretty big for some characters in the game.
Yeah,
And then, like, you combine that with the fact that he's got parting shot, so if he's an objective holder for you, he's typically going to be in your backlines anyway because of the range of his attacks. Someone gets near him, they do damage to him, he does one back and just
yeah.
leaves.
Yeah, gets out of the way. I just think he's absolutely solid. I think he's solid. I think you see him. I mean, what is he? Criminal Syndicate and Cabal. You
Yeah,
definitely see
which
him.
I think is another reason why Bob goes down for that D tier. Cabal have a better two threat
They
in
do.
affiliation.
They do. Yeah, they really do. So for me, Quinn, he absolutely makes it into the A tier. But does he do enough for you to get into S tier? I'm torn at the moment between like a high A and a low S. What's your thoughts?
So, in my opinion, and this is potentially setting a spoiler precedent for the rest of the video, there is only one S tier 2 threat in my eyes, and it is not Benjamin Poindexter. He
Yeah,
is, however, a very solid A plus character in
yeah,
my
I
book.
would. I would agree. I would agree. Because what he doesn't do is he's just solid, isn't he? He's not going to be the difference in the most cases of you winning a game or not. But he's just solid, just being able to do that one damage every single or two damage even every single turn potentially. While as you say, while scoring points on the back line is just very, very powerful. So yeah, I'm happy to see him in A tier. Cool. On to, I think, actually the newest two threats. And this goes to show how many two threats we get in the game because it's been going for 3 years now and we're still under 10. And this one is the latest one and it feels like she's been out for a long time. But it is Gabrielle Kinney, a.k.a. Honey Badger. So she is part of X-Men. She's part of X-Force, which I think they desperately needed. They really, really needed an affiliated two threat to help them out. She's solid from a damage perspective. She has a little range one bubble that basically acts as like an incinerate queen, doesn't it? So anyone within range one gets to roll one less defense die. But the one that I like is too dangerous to ignore. So it's a sort of pseudo type bodyguard, isn't it? But basically, it means you can take a hit with her rather than taking a hit with somebody else. And because she's got that healing factor, she can also access that healing factor card as well, which can be really nice at times. I think she's pretty solid. I'm not going to tell you where I think she fits quite yet, Quinn. I'm going to let you give your option first on that, or opinion first on this one.
So all of these things are true with Gabby, but there are some issues I have with her, like as a piece on the table. She's supposed to fulfill that role of just sort of being an annoyance, right? She's just there in your face. You eventually have to deal with her. The issue I find is that she's just really, really easy to deal with. And like I know you mentioned that she has access to exceptional healing factor, but she's a 2-threat model.
Yeah.
And with the affiliation she's in, you're typically running another character with healing factor in the same list. And it's typically your older sister, who's not her sister, but is like a clone of a clone. Clones are weird, man. But like typically, you've got higher value targets that are going to be far more impactful in the overall state of the game, and also, like you kind of just are forced to pair her up with Laura. I feel there's a weird sort of thing with the two of them where I feel like Laura does not need Gabby, but Gabby needs Laura in a sense, and I think that is
Yeah.
potentially just distracting from what Laura could potentially do.
Yeah, for that extra movement. Yeah, and it's also worth pointing out that she is also one of the characters that cannot contest or hold any objectives as well, isn't she? So she's never going to score you any VPs. I mean, maybe with the exception of if she's in what is it? If she's in Black Order and she KOs a character, but
I
yeah.
mean, she does have Jonathan.
She does have Jonathan, but that is a tactics card, and then you are using a tactics card for a 2-threat character.
Yeah. I
I
mean,
don't
I
get me wrong.
literally just went through the fact that I don't want to use exceptional healing factor with her. I also don't really want to use Jonathan on her.
Yeah, and so for me, I think in the affiliations she's in, I think she's a good addition because they needed a 2-threat. But for me, I don't think she's quite as low as a C. I think she would probably be sit in a B tier. But what's your thoughts?
I mean, to bring back the alphabet game that I think we did for precisely, I say we, that I did for precisely one tier list. I'm going with C for Claw Slash. I think
Oh,
she's okay in the affiliation she's part of, but I would personally never take her outside of those. And I
okay.
think as a 2-threat, being just okay in your affiliation puts you in C rather than B in my eyes.
Yeah, okay. I'm okay with that. I am okay with that. Next up is Nebula, aka Nebula. And even though Quinn, she cannot contest objectives, I absolutely love her. I know she's not the best 2-threat in the game, at least in my opinion, but she is my favourite 2-threat in the game. We talk about how Bullseye has that guaranteed damage per round. She can spike more than any of these other 2-threat characters, in my opinion, because of that shock sword assault that she has, which stupidly gives out stun and not shock, which never made sense to me. But because of that cybernetic enhancement, meaning not cybernetic, assassin, which basically means she can't hold or contest objectives, but if anybody else is doing that, she gets full rerolls, which is just real good when you're rolling 6 dice. It's really, really good. So I really like her. I think she's an absolute solid damage dealer. She's obviously contesting for that 2-threat spot in Guardians with Rocket. But I actually think in Guardians they can afford to run both. Or actually,
I think they definitely can.
yeah. But you also see her in, she's great in some other affiliations that just help her double down on those rerolls. I actually really like her in Daredevil's Crimson. I like her in Black Order as well because there's a 2-threat option that you want to be killer. She's really nice. For me, Quinn, I put her on par with Bullseye, but maybe not quite as high up the A. But I think she's a solid A tier because she's got a long move as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Nebula's very much a one-trick pony. All she does is damage, but she's enough of a threat that it's potentially diverting your opponent's resources elsewhere from your actual main threats. And I think, yeah, she definitely fits in that A tier for me. And like, she kind of just does what Gabby does, but in a way that I find is more effective. Like, there's nothing written on her card that is to say, oh yeah, you have to target this character or anything in that vein as like too dangerous to ignore. But she just has that effect on people, right?
She is inherently too dangerous to ignore, isn't she?
Exactly, yeah. She doesn't need it written on her card. It's evident from the rest of her card, yeah.
Yeah, and she's got a nice range of attacks as well. So between range 2 and range 3, she can guarantee a power. She can go for the a closer up builder that lets her generate a bit more power if she spikes at all. So yeah, I think she's really good. Okay, Quinn, let's talk about falling from grace. This is your girl Akoye, aka Akoye, who in the olden days, Quinn, you remember the olden days? She would have
probably not the olden days you're on about. I'm a lot younger than you.
You are, but she would have been topping this chart with just how good she was, because of that bodyguard, right? That was her main thing, but her bodyguard's still there. And we spoke about this before, so we won't go over all ground, but her ability to generate power now significantly limits the number of affiliations that she's good in, just because she can't get that bodyguard off as many times per game, can she?
Yeah, and it's very interesting how like a couple of minor changes like that can completely change a character. I like part of me like feels that they went a bit too far removing her power gen, but equally, they probably could have just got rid of the power gen, left an offensive reroll, or something in between. I mean, I'm still pretty happy with how Akoye is now, especially now that I've sort of started my A-Force run.
She's very good. She's very good in affiliation.
Yeah,
very,
she
very
features very prominently in that.
Yeah.
I mean, you say she's good in affiliation. I had a stint with Wakanda as well a few months ago, and like, I was not a big fan of Akoye in Wakanda. I'll be honest.
I think the problem is that you don't often need her, right? Black Panther's your big threat in Wakanda, and he doesn't need a hit taken for him. He's good enough. He's a tanky boy himself. So actually, there's a bit of a less need for her there, isn't there?
Killmonger also featured pretty heavily in that, and I would have liked it for him. It's just that she can make basically no use of the leadership because she has very, very poor power generation now.
Yeah, she can't afford to be spending her power. I think you're right. I think she's got some good things on the card still, but she's definitely fallen from grace a little bit. She does fit elsewhere as well. Anywhere that can, make her, give her a bit more power, which is why really good in Air Force, isn't she? Because you can funnel that power into her. Brotherhood is one way you could funnel it in, but I just don't think there's a place for her in there. And then unfortunately, she's up against the best bodyguarders in the game in Avengers, so she's never really getting into Avengers. So with that all said, Quinn, for me right now, she's a solid B tier. I think she does a very good job at what she does, but it's just a bit more limited.
I'm very happy with a B. I don't think there's anything on it. Oh, B for bodyguard. There we go.
B for bodyguard.
I was about to say I don't think there's anything on a card beginning with B, and then I opened it and went, oh yeah, that ability that is like the one thing she does. That starts with a B.
So Quinn, we spoke about how a 6-threat, a 2-threat having a 6 dice spender is really good. What about a 2-threat having a range 5 strength builder? How does that sound?
That sounds like something that AMG should never have designed because I really, really hate rabbits.
You leave the trash panda alone.
Me leave him alone. He's not left me alone.
I know. You guys know, Quinn, as do you know as well. I've played so much Guardians this year, and Rocket Raccoon, I think, has probably featured in all but maybe 1 or 2 games. Right, he is absolutely embedded in there. And the fact now his partnership with Groot just works so much better than it did. And I think you have to take that into consideration, as we did with, with Honey Badger and Laura. I think you have to look at Groot when you're looking at Rocket, don't you? Because for the most part, they are a pairing. But even just by himself, he's a size 1, right? So even if you did want to pick him up and throw him into someone, he ain't going to do much damage to them. And he can't take any collision damage himself. And although he's only 223, always benefiting from cover, just somehow makes him far tankier than what anyone would ever think.
The average of what most people would roll on 3 dice, with the additional fact that if, on those 2 dice you get a single success, which isn't like out of the world, like out of this world odds. You're unless you've got a skull, you're immediately shifting the next one along to the next tier up.
Yeah.
So it just sort of it lets you do sort of a win more type thing with defense.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact that he does have that personal bodyguard as well. So if you are running Groot with him and Groot's with him too, Groot can just take the hit for him.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing when you draw a parallel between, say, Rocket and Gabby, right? Is that, whilst I was saying about Gabby, I feel like Laura doesn't need Gabby, but, Gabby needs Laura. I don't think the same is true for Rocket.
I agree. I think
bringing the two together as a 5-threat is really great, but if you're looking for a 2-threat, like, Rocket is still a very solid option without Groot, like,
100%.
babysitting him.
Yeah, if you want a back point holder that can do some damage, really, really solid. And you are right. I mean, I played towards the back end of playing with Guardians, where I had the most success in the TTS leagues and other such things. They weren't wedded to each other. Quite often you would find them more than, I would need Groot to go up and do something. So you'd find them more than range 2 apart. And, Rocket can hold his own. And if anyone does come to try and do some damage to him, he's got that booby traps. And the number of times it has caught people out where they're on 1 or 2 health, they've come up to try and slap the trash panda. He pays his 3 power, he rolls his 4 dice and gets, 1, sometimes 2 successes, and just KOs them there and then, or dazes them there and then. And it catches people out. And his spender's really good. 7 dice, and on a wild, it's got that vortex, which has the push but also has the damage, can be really good at just taking out some characters that are in and around. So I think he's really good. I don't think he's good enough for S tier. And I don't think he's your S tier either. And I'm going to say that you agree with me on an A. And I'm not sure if it's true or not, but that's my stab. I think he's a good solid A.
Well, Rich, I can reveal to you that Rocket is, in fact, not my S tier 2.
There we go. There we go, isn't it? I love the Simon Cowell thing there. I can reveal to you that.
I was going more for the suspense they build in like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire.
The bullshittery that is. So speaking of potential S tier characters, Quinn, let's talk about Mortimer, shall we?
Well, I thought we were going to skip straight ahead to one. Okay, I guess we could talk about Toad.
So, Toad, Mortimer Toynbee. Look, if you look at other 2-threats and look at the amount of text on their card, right? It's not always the case, but usually the more things somebody has, the better they are as a character, because they've got access to more things. It's not a hard, fast rule, but you just look at the amount of text that Toad has there and the number of different superpowers that he has, ranging from active to reactive to innate superpowers. He's just so good, Quinn, isn't he? There is no better 2-threat in the game for objective handling and objective playing. He's not in the same league as the other 3 A-tiers when it comes to damage output, but that's not his game, is it, Quinn?
No, it's not his game at all. He's like a dedicated objective player, and he does it exceptionally well. Unless you play like me and Rich and just, table your opponents, or in some cases, Rich, refuse to table your opponents.
I don't know what you mean.
points are the way that you win games of MCP, and Toad is gonna help you like either keep parity or like charge ahead of your opponent on points. And like there's a few reasons why. I mean, obviously the first one I think people will think of is the prehensile tone, right, Rich?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, being able
Yeah.
to interact from range 2 away, it triples the distance from which you can interact with an objective.
Yeah, people often think that going from range 1 to range 2 is just double. It's not that's not how the
Yeah,
measurement works in this game, is it?
it's a 1 inch change to a 3 inch change,
Yeah.
which is huge. You know, it means that if he, for example, is holding objectives and gets dazed from like a distance and your opponent can't go in and like scoop them all up, next turn when he flips, he can just grab them all and run off again.
Yeah.
Like without having to do any of that movement. You know, he's got a hop, he's got his own sort of reposition. That can be really good for getting you to stand on a point, or to be an actionless way to get in range to use that prehensile tone to pick up objectives.
Yeah.
You know,
I was going to say, let's not also forget wall crawler as well. So when it does come to getting away, he can get away from anything. And
Yeah.
even with slippery, the advance, because he has inherently wall crawler, usually advances don't let you climb. He isn't climbing. He just gets to go over them, which is crazy, isn't it? Like
he can go from one side of a size 4 to the other and just be completely like unreachable by the opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah, slippery, great superpower as well. Finders keepers could be a really good way of just going, you know, that character that's got that objective he's either gonna die soon, or I want them to be less of a target that my opponent wants to fixate on. I'm going to remove the pressure of having that objective on them and go off and do my own thing. And then there's one more thing that I think really, really pushes Toad into that, like, I mean, I'm going to say into that S tier category, and it's the fact that he's front loaded in terms of stamina.
Huge. Absolutely huge. Most 4 threats you see are 4/4. He's
Most 4
5/3.
threats? What
Sorry.
threats have you been looking at, Rich?
Most
Fucking
team
Ursa
threats.
Major?
Yeah, that's the one. But the fact he's 5/3 is huge. Absolutely huge, isn't it?
Yeah, because, I mean, you always want to be front loaded on a character. It is simply, it is like just straight up better to be front loaded.
Yeah.
Rather than having an even split on either side, you'd rather be front loaded because if you're on your healthy side, you contest objectives better than someone that is on their unhealthy side.
Yeah. Worth pointing out, actually, Quinn, just on that contest, he can't contest from range 2, guys. So that's just one that's worth pointing out, because I've had that question asked before. But he can flip an objective or can pick up an objective from that range 2. So yeah, I agree, Quinn. He goes straight into S tier. With the way the game is at the moment, he is just so good. Okay, Quinn, rounding them out then is, I believe, your favourite of all of them.
Yeah, I am well known for my unwavering love and fealty to this character.
Wong. Now, I want to ask you a question, Quinn. In this realm of new big bads and other such things, is Vashanti's blessing better, or even Faithful Assistant better than it was previously, where he can, move power over, or he can remove 2 wounds, I think it is, or he can remove a special condition? Is there more value in that now than what there used to be, or?
So I think it very much depends on what side of the coin you land on with regard to these new I say new, but sort of the big bad meta, right?
Yeah.
Where you've got your Malekiths running around and your
Your Thanoses
like
and
that.
Hulks and everybody else, yeah.
Yeah. If you're the person playing with the big bad, I think there's potential merit to Vishanti's blessing.
Yep.
I mean, I think it's still debatable as to how great that merit is. I think if you're on the other side of it, it becomes very difficult for you to utilize it because typically those big bad characters are either 1 or 2 tapping whichever character they're going after, which means that there's no opportunity for that healing to take place because they're either dazed or dead if that's who they've set their sights on, right?
Yeah. I think one of my biggest problems with him is that he has nothing on the offensive side. He's got one attack, and it's I always think, oh, maybe he would work well, and you see you see Medpack disappearing now. So obviously, we spoke about how healing is at a premium in this game now, because outside of affiliation, there are very, very few ways to be able to heal characters. That's affiliated tactics cards, sorry. So you'd think that with all these things that we talk about, that his stock would just go up and up and up. But I think the problem is he's just so easy to get rid of, and he doesn't offer any sort of threat in the game whatsoever, really, does it? You talk about the threat that Nebula poses, or even Black Widow can go up and take a point, come back and tick it over and things. And if somebody does come near her, she's got some tech to be able to deal with it. Like, if you want to take one off the board, you can take one off the board very, very easily. But you often don't need to, because he's not doing anything. And I think that's one of my biggest problems with him, is that he's just a bit of a meh. He's got some good things he can do. They're just not great in the game right now. I think there's some space for him. I think he's got more utility than Bob. I really do. Yeah. So I think he's probably, with the changes and things like that, I think he's probably gone up in stock a little bit. So for me, he's probably a C tier, because I think in Defenders, for example, I think he is okay. You do see him in convocation lists as well, but I think they've done our boy Wong dirty, really. Like, he is, I mean, in the MCU right now, he is the Sorcerer Supreme, and okay, his power level is not on par with Doctor Strange, but he's definitely been done dirty a little bit, I think, by Atomic Mass Games.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, just sort of going a little bit back to Akoye for a moment, like we sort of discussed how losing those two bits of tech that she had on her card, the power gain and the reroll, massively influenced how good she was as a character. I feel like a slight nudge like that for Wong would immediately skyrocket him up this tier list. There's just a little something that he's missing. Like, if he had a 1 power spender that was a range 4 dice mystic that had an effect on it, it would suddenly drastically improve the utility he has as a character.
I was thinking, just make his strike range 3.
Yeah, maybe range 3 and give it an energy tag instead of a physical tag.
Would have been perfect, because then he can still hold a back point and still be in range to do the other things. Whereas, more often than not, he has to use a meditate to gain a power to be able to do a faithful assistant, or okay, he can always do the Versatility blessing, but it costs an action. His action economy isn't great, is it? And his power economy isn't great.
Yeah, I mean, I think also with the whole thing of Medpack going away and Patch-Up being the only real access to healing, outside of character and affiliation specific things, you would assume that Wong would fill the vacuum that Medpack left. The issue is that a 2-threat character is a far greater opportunity cost than a tactic card, especially when that healing is the only thing that 2-threat is contributing, because let's be honest, he's not doing much else. He might stand there and score you a handful of VPs throughout a game, but also just 2 damage isn't it's nowhere near as impactful as the 3 of Medpack, I feel.
No, and I actually think Vishanti's Blessing, I actually think one of the things that could make him go up in pecking order is actually remove that the last line on there. A character may be affected by the superpower only once per turn.
I mean, it is an action, I suppose. Yeah, I thought the route you were going to go down was remove the or and replace it with an and.
Oh, that would be
so heal 2 and get rid of a condition. I think that would be really, really strong. Because there are some games of MCP you play where no one gets a single condition the whole game, and there are other ones where conditions are littering the board
everywhere,
next to your characters. And like, you know, I don't think it's a massive change, but it would just be a nice bit of utility and something that offsets him a little bit from the Sorcerer Supreme himself, Strange,
Yeah,
like the
yeah. So
OG
he's not as
Strange.
bound to him, is he? So no, I like it. I think that could be a good idea. But yeah, so are you okay with him in C just to round things off for this one?
Yeah, like I mean, I'm not the biggest Wong fan in MCP, but I don't think I would ever do him the disservice of putting him into D tier.
No, no, I don't think he is. I don't think he is. Cool. So there we go, guys. That is our, I suppose, second tier list done. We did the leaderships last week, and here are the 2 threat characters. Let us know down in the comment section below, what do you think? There'll also be a link to this tier maker, this saved, in the link below as well, because you guys keep asking, can you get a list, can you see it, that sort of thing. So yes, there'll be a link down in the description below. If you've liked this video, please leave a like. It really does help. And a huge shout out to all the Patreons who have supported us on the channel so far. And if you want to support us even further, as I mentioned, we do have that Patreon up and running. So again, link down in the description below. Quinn, thanks again for joining me on this one. It's always fun to talk through these characters, and it's weird, isn't it, how a little change here and there, sometimes not even to a character, can actually bump them up and down the pecking order. So yeah, it's always fun to go back and revisit these. But guys, as always, it leaves me with just enough time to say stay well, keep safe, and until next time, bye for now.
See you.